Yet another fascinating chapter of the Wednesday night wars took place after the results from Week 11's ratings were released yesterday between AEW and NXT. In an incredible turn of events, both NXT and AEW managed to draw 778,000 viewers on Wednesday night, which is the first time between both companies that they've actually drawn since both shows started rivaling on the Wednesday night. Now, it's hard to say what exactly this means in the immediate aftermath, but the fact that there's a combined 1.5 million viewers watching both shows in a period that, to be fair, usually sees ratings tail off around this time of year, it's quite promising, really. Now, it speaks to the quality of both shows that fans are actually choosing to continue to watch and invest in these quality products on a Wednesday night. And whether you're an AEW fan or an NXT fan, or maybe you're just a very smart person who's realized you can just enjoy the wrestling for what it is, it doesn't matter, because it means right about now, it's a fantastic time to be a wrestling fan. The last time we were getting draws in a ratings war was back in 1996, right before WCW exploded with the birth of the New World Order. Now, I realise that a draw might not be the most appealing thing for fans. Some people like to see an absolutely definitive winner, but sometimes it makes for some quite compelling viewing. I'm Adam Nicholas, and these are 10 awesome wrestling matches that ended in a draw. Number 10, KAZUCHIKA Okada versus Kenny Omega, Dominion 2017. Now, the Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer had already given the first bout between these two a whopping 6 stars and broke his 5-star rating system, much to the displeasure, the upset, the absolute outrage of most of the internet wrestling community, and completely destroyed his own system. But it was that good, so what do you expect? And he followed that up by giving an extra 1/4 star to this particular bout between the two, because, well, I guess he just wasn't sick enough of the internet telling him he was an idiot. The match began cautiously, but Omega pounced on an early leg injury to Okada and hit a number of different moves on him, including an Asahi moonsault and a particularly dangerous looking dragon suplex. And then after Okada had managed to land some truly majestic drop kicks of his own on Kenny and started to take a bit of control, he found himself on top of the match, but just couldn't put the gutsy performer away. Despite failing to land his patented one-winged angel in the first encounter between the two, Omega did manage to land in this particular match, but it was an agonizing 2 count as the pair moved into the third and final stage of their match, and they were absolutely exhausted after what was a grueling 60 minutes. And it was an exhaustion that the two played off during the final moments of the match. At one point, Kenny Omega inadvertently managed to avoid a Rainmaker by dropping to his knees with absolute exhaustion, and Okada would just miss out on the victory as he didn't quite have the energy to muster up a last-ditch pin towards the closing stages of the match. Number 9, Royal Rumble match 1994. Now, of all the matches in WWE, you'd imagine that the Royal Rumble was surely one that was exempt from a draw. I mean, literally, the nature of the match is for one person to throw the other person over the top rope. How on earth is that supposed to end in a goddamn tie? Well, the answer to that one should be pretty clear for anybody who saw the Royal Rumble 2005, where both John Cena and Batista, the last 2 men in that Rumble, saw themselves go over the top rope at the same time, landing on the floor to mass confusion from the referees, who were not expecting this at all, but more importantly and most hilariously, to managing to get Vince McMahon so furious and so angry that the man managed to tear both of his quads. Honestly, if you haven't seen that, stop what you're doing right now and go and watch it. But unlike that unscripted chaos that took place at the 2005 Royal Rumble, the Lex Luger-Bret Hart co-win at the Royal Rumble 1994 was very much intended. It was a great way to build up a feud between the two superstars who were essentially vying to become the top guy of the company. Hulk Hogan had recently departed WWE, so the main event scene was wide open for some new blood to come and take the crown. As you can imagine, the crowd was obviously baffled by the result, even after President Jack Tunney had come down to explain what was going on. Needless to say, there was never another draw at a Royal Rumble that was deliberately booked after this one, and that's probably why Vince McMahon was so goddamn pissed off in 2005. Number 8, Bret Hart versus Diesel, Royal Rumble 1995. Just 1 year after Bret Hart was involved in that infamous Royal Rumble finish, WWE, in their infinite wisdom, decided it was a good idea to book the match between the Hitman and Big Daddy Cool to end in a similar fashion. Now, there were a number of incredible matches between these two during the New Generation era, and the two just seem to have a way of bringing out the best in one another. Now, this one did have its flaws, to be fair, and the most egregious of these happened at the very end of the match, when half the locker room emptied from the back, came down to the ring, interfered in the match, and continued to beat the crap out of both competitors. Ultimately, this would lead to the match being declared a draw, which, to be fair, was a bit of a disappointment for the fans who turned up on the night because they were very excited to see these two genuinely go at it and who would come out victorious with the gold. Nevertheless, this was the new generation era, so it was always going to end with something good. And it did. Hart and Nash ended it with a handshake and a hug, to be fair, that the best friends would be happy to call their own. Something nice to give the fans a good vibe to end it on, and really, it kind of gave off this, us versus them, after, let's be honest, the pair of them had just had their asses handed to them by the rest of the locker room. Number 7, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels, Royal Rumble 2004. What is it with the Royal Rumble and draws, man? For God's sake, come up with something new. Just 1 year after the Cena and Batista incident, and funnily enough, 10 years after the Bret Hart and Lex Luger incident, would you believe it, WWE's creative team decided that the battle of the alphabet between HBK and Triple H in a last man standing match would end, yes, in a draw with neither man emerging victorious. Despite Triple H and Michaels not being able to answer the referee's 10 count resulting in the said draw, it didn't really matter because the amount of blood, sweat and tears that both competitors put into this match in the name of the World Heavyweight Championship was enough to make the end result quite a satisfying one, actually. A big match spectacle and a big pay-per-view for the big gold belt, no less, saw both men needing medical attention at the end of the match. Triple H was on a stretcher and was being carried out essentially by his Evolution teammates who were by his side for support, while Shawn Michaels, who was initially on a stretcher, managed to get off and walk up the ramp at the end of the match by his own volition, and let's be honest, just looking like a bit of a badass, really. There may have been no winner to the match, but Shawn Michaels would leave the arena as the last man standing. Number 6, Randy Orton versus Edge, Over the Limit 2010. Now, anytime a match ends without a clear winner, let's be honest, the fans aren't happy. Most people are fairly disgruntled. Some people might understand it, even if they don't really agree with it. But I think it's fair to say that for this particular match, absolutely nobody was happy with this. Nobody understood, nobody was satisfied with the ending, and a double countout really didn't feel like the finish to this match that the fans would have wanted. But I don't think that was entirely the plan, you see, because Orton appeared to injure his shoulder when he was dropped on a barricade, but for that point at least, it seemed like maybe that was all part of the work, designed to kind of build up the hype behind Randy Orton, the Viper, as the underdog in this story and really get the fans invested in his comeback. And to be honest, it kind of worked for this one. The crowd was super into it, right up until the point where Randy Orton heard another pop, but unfortunately, it wasn't from the crowd. This time it came from his shoulder. While pounding the mat in preparation for an RKO, of all things, something he's surely done a million times before, Orton's kayfabe became a reality as he managed to put out his own shoulder, which resulted in a nasty looking injury. Orton's arms limp by his side as he walks around like a gorilla, while Edge, unfortunately, had to sell an improvised tap to his head like he'd just been punted in the head by a 10-ton truck. Since Randy Orton was unable to do the RKO, which was the planned finish to the match, they had to call an audible, and sure enough, that's exactly what they did. On the outside, Edge went for a spear, he missed, smashed into the barricade, knocked himself down, Orton was on the floor, and neither man managed to get up and get back in the ring before the referee's 10 count, that's 5, the 10 count was finished. It was a disappointing end to the match, and unfortunately it kind of stifled the momentum of what promised to be a really good feud between the Rated R superstar and the Viper. Number 5, Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels, Raw Homecoming 2005. This 30-minute Iron Man match was an absolute masterpiece from top to bottom at a time when both performers were arguably just about at the peak of their powers. While it wasn't always the prettiest match, and to be honest, that was something that kind of added to the bout, truth be told, this one never stopped the intensity from the moment the first bell rang. An absolute exhibition of tenacity and resiliency, the match had a ton of smart reversals, near falls, and well thought out spots. Just when it seemed like we were going to get a last-minute submission by Kurt Angle, Michaels managed to roll out of the ankle lock, and all of a sudden, it was Shawn Michaels who looked like he was going to sweet chin music his way to a victory, but alas, the match ended, the time limit ran out before he was able to get the cover and capitalise on a bit of the old chin music. Intensity, integrity, intelligence and heartbreak for two sexy boys. I mean, in wrestling, what more can you ask for, really? Number 4, the Steiner brothers versus Bret and Owen Hart, 1994. One of the few WWE tag team matches to ever end in a draw, the Steiner brothers versus the Hart brothers was also one of the most exceptional and underrated tag team matches in WWE history. In terms of technicality, it's hard to find a better way of how to incorporate technical wrestling into a match while also keeping the fans excited. And if that wasn't enough technical aspect for you, then what about putting Mr. Perfect on commentary just to make it all a little bit better? Scott Steiner has never looked better than he did in this match, showcasing his incredible strength while also proving he could execute complex moves just like his big brother. His time in the ring with Owen Hart was especially great because their two styles complemented one another so perfectly, and it made for a very entertaining viewing. All told, this match was a 30-minute classic, and somehow the double countout didn't even seem to take away from the match, to be honest. If anything, it actually felt kind of right. While it certainly requires a little bit more patience than the tag team matches of today, if you're prepared to just take a minute, watch some wrestling where it's allowed to breathe for a second, where things are allowed to build, then believe you me, this is the match for you. Number 3, Terry Funk versus Sabu versus Shane Douglas, ECW, the night the line was crossed. Back when ECW stood for Eastern Championship Wrestling, there was no shortage of guys in the back who were still prepared to bring the extreme when they came to the ring. Two names that were at the top of that list: Sabu and Terry Funk. Billed as an American three-way dance of all things, this one had a 60-minute time limit while also implementing some weird Royal Rumble style rules when it came to how each competitor entered the ring. However, despite the convoluted approach, this actually ended up being one of the matches that would put ECW on the map, combining classic wrestling psychology with technical maneuvers and a massive element of hardcore, as you'd imagine, to boot, which made this one a match that you literally could not take your eyes off. The final 10 minutes of this match are a mesmerizing bedlam. The Bad Breed interferes, Sherry Martel interferes, both in a fairly major way, and then you've got Terry Funk, who's just beating the crap out of a referee like a goddamn madman. Yes, as you can imagine, this was a messy match, and it only got messier after the time limit ran its course. But would you believe it, unlike something that would probably happen in WWE, despite the fans not seeing an overall winner in this match, when it was announced that there would indeed be no winner, no victor in this match, there wasn't a chorus of boos. No. This was so good. That was a massive eruption of cheers from the fans. That's when you know you're doing something right. Number 2, Samoa Joe versus CM Punk 2, Ring of Honor 2004. Nowadays, if a match was to end in a draw after 60 minutes of wrestling, you'd imagine there would be a full-scale mutiny in whatever arena the match was being held. Rewind to 2004 though, where a young Samoa Joe and CM Punk did just that for Ring of Honor, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a disappointed fan in the entire building. Now, of course, it does help when you've got two wrestlers who have an endless bag of tricks to draw from, while both being schooled in multiple different styles of wrestling. Creating a blend of Japanese martial arts, technical submissions, and old school wrestling psychology, these two managed to put on a match and a performance that I think a lot of people might even consider Oscar-worthy. Now, while some people can kind of get bored of never-ending reversals, one fan in particular at that event decided to voice his displeasure halfway through. Well, it didn't matter here because these two managed to make it work, and CM Punk even managed to get a huge pop from the audience when he challenged the guy and basically said, if you don't like it, you can lump it. And with the exception of that one particular guy, the entire audience were shouting and cheering and applauding and supporting these two throughout the entirety of those 60 minutes, and it didn't matter about the end result because ultimately this was all about the performance. At number 1, Sting versus Ric Flair, Clash of Champions 1988. It simply does not get much better than this matchup. Draw or no draw, the Stinger versus the Nature Boy remains an absolute undisputed classic, and it's the perfect example of a man who is at the top of his game, helping to establish a brand new star while making sure the shine remains on his own. While Ric Flair has excelled at playing an egomaniac for the majority of his career, the real life Ric Flair actually is probably one of the most humble and company-orientated men that you're going to find in sports entertainment. And to be honest, it's no surprise that Sting would follow in similar footsteps. Back in 1988, it was clear that the top brass were high on Sting's abilities and wanted to give him a major push into the spotlight, and so he was paired alongside the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. The match itself was picture perfect, showcasing the young Sting, while Ric Flair sold every single hammerlock like he was having his entire soul ripped out of his body. The blend of high-flying aerial maneuvers from Sting and the Nature Boy's tactical and technical precision was the perfect meshing of styles, and over 45 minutes of a grueling and intense affair, the match would finally come to an end with no winner. A hard-fought draw made for a brilliant end to this match, and despite the Stinger perhaps not quite being ready to be the man who beats the man to become the man, it's fair to say that going the distance with Ric Flair and taking him all the way to the very edge of his powers launched Sting to the top of the card. He was an instant star on the night, and I think, well, let's just say things worked out pretty well for him in the end, didn't it? So that's it. That's our 10 awesome wrestling matches that ended in a draw. As always, I'm sure there's probably some that we didn't get, or some that you think might be worth mentioning. Let us know in the comments down below what those are. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, hit the old subscribe button if you haven't already. You can find the original article for this on whatculture.com/WWE. You can follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. You can follow me on Twitter at It's Adam Nicholas, or if you just want some more videos and me to shut the hell up, well, guess what? There should be two just over here. I'm Adam Nicholas, and I will see you next time.